Welcome to the Story Lab. I hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. The morning sun warmed my face as I stepped out onto our front porch, breathing in the crisp air. Another day to make a difference. I spotted Mrs. Henderson across the street, struggling with her groceries. Mrs. Henderson, let me help you with those, I called out, jogging over to her. Oh, Ethan, you're such a dear, she said, her wrinkled face breaking into a grateful smile. I took the heavy bags from her frail hands. It's no trouble at all. How's Mr. Henderson doing? He's having a good day, thank heaven. You should stop by for tea sometime. I'd love that, I replied, carrying her groceries into her house. After helping Mrs. Henderson, I headed to the local animal shelter. The barks and meows greeted me as I walked in. Ethan, right on time, Sarah, the shelter manager, said. We've got a litter of kittens that need socializing. I grinned. Lead the way. For the next couple of hours, I played with the kittens, cleaned cages, and walked dogs. It was tiring work, but the wagging tails and purrs made it all worthwhile. As I was leaving, Sarah caught my arm. Ethan, I don't know what we'd do without you. You're a godsend. I shrugged off the compliment. I'm just doing what anyone would do. When I got home, Jessica was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone with a frown. Hey, honey, I said, leaning in to kiss her cheek. She turned her face at the last second, so I caught the corner of her mouth instead. You smell like wet dog, she said, wrinkling her nose. I chuckled. That's the smell of a good deed done. How was your day? Jessica sighed dramatically. Stressful. Mark's been pushing for this big account, and if we land it, it could mean a promotion for me. That's great news, I said, genuinely happy for her. We should celebrate. She rolled her eyes. Celebrate what? The possibility of maybe getting a raise that still won't put us anywhere near where we should be? I felt my smile falter. Jess, we're doing fine. We have a roof over our heads, food on the table. Yeah, and a car that's falling apart and a wardrobe that's years out of date, she snapped. Do you know what Melissa wore to work today? A Gucci blazer. Gucci, Ethan. I bit back a retort. This was an old argument, and I was tired of it. Well, maybe this promotion will change things, I said instead. Jessica's face suddenly lit up, but not in the way I hoped. It was calculating, almost predatory. Actually, there's an office party coming up. It's really important for my career. You'll come, right? I hesitated. Jessica's office parties were always uncomfortable affairs, full of fake smiles and veiled insults. But I could see how much it meant to her. Of course, I said. When is it? This Friday, she replied, already turning back to her phone. Wear that blue suit I bought you last year. And try not to talk about the shelter too much. It makes us sound poor. I nodded, swallowing the hurt her words caused. Sure thing, honey. I'll be on my best behavior. As I watched Jessica scroll through her social media, comparing our life to her friends' carefully curated posts, I couldn't help but wonder when things had changed between us. When had my wife become so dissatisfied with our life? With me? I shook off the thought. It was just stress from work. Once she got this promotion, things would get better. They had to. Little did I know, this office party would be the beginning of the end. But as I stood there in our kitchen, watching my wife's face illuminated by her phone screen, I still believed in us. I still believed in her. I was a fool. The moment we stepped into the venue, I felt out of place. The room was awash with designer suits, glittering jewelry, and the unmistakable air of wealth. Jessica's hand tightened on my arm, her nails digging into my skin through the fabric of my suit. Remember, she hissed, best behavior. These people are important. I nodded, plastering on a smile. Got it. I'll be charming. Jessica's lips tightened. Just don't overdo it. Before I could respond, we were approached by a group of Jessica's co-workers. I recognized a few faces from previous events, but most were strangers to me. Jessica, you made it, a woman in a slinky red dress exclaimed. Her eyes flicked to me, a hint of curiosity in them. And this must be your husband. Ethan, I said, extending my hand. It's a pleasure to meet you. Clarissa, she supplied, her handshake firm. Jessica's told us so little about you. I chuckled. ignoring the sting of her words. Well, I'm not nearly as interesting as the work you all do. I'd much rather hear about that. As we chatted, I could feel Jessica's tension radiating off her. I did my best to keep the conversation light, asking about their work and sharing amusing anecdotes when appropriate. To my surprise, I found myself enjoying the interaction. You volunteer at an animal shelter? Clarissa asked, her eyes wide. That's amazing. I've always wanted to do something like that, but never found the time. I smiled. It's incredibly rewarding. If you're ever interested, I'd be happy to show you around. I'd love that, Clarissa said, her smile genuine. Jessica's grip on my arm tightened painfully. Ethan, darling, why don't you get us some drinks? I nodded, excusing myself. As I made my way to the bar, I noticed a young woman standing alone, looking uncomfortable. She couldn't have been more than 25, and her dress, while nice, wasn't nearly as expensive as those around her. First time? I asked, sidling up next to her. She jumped slightly, then gave me a sheepish smile. Is it that obvious? I laughed. Only to a fellow fish out of water. I'm Ethan. Laura, she replied. I'm just an intern. I shouldn't even be here, but Mr. Thompson insisted all staff attend. Ah, the big boss, I said, nodding. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting him yet. Laura's face tightened almost imperceptibly. Consider yourself lucky. Before I could ask what she meant, Jessica appeared at my side. Ethan, what's taking so long with those drinks? Sorry, honey. I was just chatting with Laura here. She's an intern in your department. Jessica's eyes swept over Laura, dismissive and cold. Oh, yes, I think I've seen you around. Ethan, we should get back to the group. It was nice meeting you, Laura. As Jessica dragged me away, I glanced back at Laura. She gave me a small wave, her eyes filled with sympathy. I had a feeling she knew more than she was letting on. The night wore on, and I found myself actually enjoying some of the conversations. People seemed genuinely interested in my volunteer work, and I even managed to make a few of them laugh with my stories. Jessica, however, grew increasingly agitated. Every time I spoke, she would cut in, trying to steer the conversation back to work or to herself. I could see the annoyance in her eyes, the tight set of her jaw. Ethan, darling, she said, her voice sickly sweet. Why don't you tell them about that time you mixed up the dog food orders? You know, when you accidentally fed the chihuahuas the Great Dane food? The group laughed, but it wasn't the warm laughter from before. This was uncomfortable, forced. I felt my cheeks heat up. It was an honest mistake, I said, trying to keep my voice light. And hey, those chihuahuas had never been so full in their lives. More laughter, this time genuine. Jessica's face darkened. Suddenly, the room hushed. A man had entered, tall and imposing, with salt and pepper hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mark Thompson had arrived. He made his way through the crowd, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries. When he reached us, Jessica straightened, her entire demeanor changing. Mark, she exclaimed, her voice higher than usual. So glad you could make it. Mark's eyes roamed over Jessica, lingering in places they shouldn't. Jessica, always a pleasure. And this must be the famous Ethan. We shook hands, his grip unnecessarily firm. Nice to meet you, sir, I said. Mark grinned, all teeth. Please call me Mark. We're all friends here. He turned to the group. You know, I was thinking of getting a dog. Maybe Ethan here can give me some tips on which breed pisses on the carpet the least. The group erupted in laughter. Jessica's laugh was the loudest, her eyes shining as she looked at Mark. I felt my stomach turn. Actually, I said, my voice steady, if you're looking for a dog, I'd be happy to introduce you to some of our rescues. They're all house-trained and in need of good homes. Mark's smile faltered for a moment before returning, sharper than before. How charitable of you, Ethan. But I think I'll stick to purebreds. Less baggage, you know? I bit my tongue, forcing a smile. To each their own. The conversation moved on, but I couldn't shake the unease that had settled over me. The way Jessica looked at Mark, the way she laughed at his crude jokes, it all felt wrong. As the night wore on, I found myself drifting back to Laura. She was still by herself, nursing a glass of wine. "How are you holding up?" I asked. She gave me a weak smile. "About as well as can be expected. Your wife seems intense." I chuckled. "She's just stressed about work. This party is important to her." Laura's eyes darted to where Jessica was standing, hanging on Mark's every word. "I'm sure it is." There was something in her tone that made me pause. "Laura, is there something?" "Ethan." Jessica's voice cut through the crowd. "Come here. Mark wants to tell you about his new yacht." I sighed. "Duty calls." "It was nice talking to you, Laura." As I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something important, something that everyone else seemed to know. The party was winding down, the crowd thinning as people made their excuses and headed home. Jessica had been by Mark's side all night, laughing too loudly at his jokes, touching his arm more often than necessary. I tried to tell myself it was just networking, just her trying to secure that promotion. But the knot in my stomach told a different story. "I need to use the ladies' room," Jessica announced suddenly, her words slightly slurred. "I'll be right back." I watched her weave through the remaining guests, noticing how she stumbled slightly in her high heels. Something wasn't right. Jessica could usually hold her liquor better than this. "You okay, man?" a voice asked. I turned to see Laura, concern etched on her face. "Yeah, I'm fine," I lied. "Just a bit tired." Laura bit her lip, looking conflicted. "Ethan, I think there's something you should know." But before she could continue, I saw Jessica. She wasn't heading towards the restrooms. Instead, she was making her way towards a hallway on the other side of the room. Mark Thompson was nowhere to be seen. "Excuse me," I said to Laura, my voice tight. "I need to check on something." I followed Jessica at a distance, my heart pounding in my chest. She glanced around furtively before slipping into a room. The door didn't close completely behind her. I approached slowly, telling myself I was being paranoid. There had to be a reasonable explanation for this. Maybe she was feeling sick and needed a place to lie down. Maybe she was making a private phone call. But as I neared the door, I heard voices. Mark's deep baritone, followed by Jessica's breathy laugh. "You know promotions come with a small price," Mark was saying, his tone smug. "I'm willing to pay," Jessica replied, her voice husky with desire. My world tilted on its axis. I pushed the door open, the scene before me searing itself into my brain. Jessica was on her knees in front of Mark, her hands on his belt. They both turned to look at me, Jessica's eyes wide with shock. Mark's narrowed in annoyance. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the distant chatter of the remaining partygoers, oblivious to the drama unfolding in this small room. Then, something inside me snapped. With a roar of rage, I lunged at Mark. My fist connected with his jaw, sending him stumbling backward. I tackled him to the ground, all the hurt and betrayal fueling my actions. "Ethan, stop!" Jessica screamed, but her voice sounded distant, unimportant. I landed another punch, feeling a sick satisfaction as Mark's nose crunched under my knuckles. Blood spurted, staining his expensive shirt. Suddenly, hands were pulling me off him. Security guards, their faces grim. Jessica was sobbing, her mascara running down her cheeks. "You bitch!" I spat at her, my voice raw with emotion. "Don't you dare come home. We're done." I shrugged off the security guards and stormed out of the room. A crowd had gathered, drawn by the commotion. I pushed past them, ignoring their whispers and stares. Laura stood at the edge of the crowd, her face a mixture of sympathy and guilt. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. I should have told you sooner." I paused, looking at her. "How long?" She swallowed hard. "Months. It's been an open secret in the office." I nodded, a cold calm settling over me. "Thank you for your honesty, Laura. At least someone in this godforsaken place has some integrity." As I walked out of the building, my mind was already racing. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Jessica and Mark thought they could humiliate me, betray me. They had no idea what was coming. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. "Alex? It's Ethan. I need your help. It's time to call on that favor you owe me." As I hung up, a grim smile spread across my face. They wanted to play games? Fine. But they were about to learn that I played to win. And I played for keeps. The morning after the disastrous party, I sat in my living room, nursing a cup of coffee and a bruised hand. The house felt empty without Jessica, but I pushed aside any lingering sentimentality. She'd made her choice. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I opened it to find Laura standing there, looking nervous. Ethan, hi. I hope it's okay that I came by. I got your address from the employee directory. I stepped aside to let her in. It's fine, Laura. Come in. She entered, her eyes darting around the room. I wanted to check on you after, well, you know. I nodded, gesturing for her to sit. I appreciate that. How bad is the fallout at the office? Laura sank onto the couch, wringing her hands. It's not great. Everyone's talking about it. Mark's trying to spin it as you being unstable and jealous. I snorted. Of course he is. What about Jessica? She hasn't been in. Word is she's staying at Mark's second apartment. The information hit me like a punch to the gut, but I kept my face neutral. I see. Laura, I need to know everything. How long has this been going on? Laura took a deep breath. Months, maybe even a year. It started with little things, late nights at the office, private meetings. Then people started noticing how they looked at each other. The inside jokes. It became an open secret. And no one thought to tell me? I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. I wanted to, Laura said, her eyes pleading, but I was scared. Mark has a lot of power, and I'm just an intern. I'm so sorry, Ethan. I reached out and patted her hand. It's not your fault, Laura. You're the only one who's been honest with me. Thank you for that. She smiled weakly. So what are you going to do now? Before I could answer, there was another knock at the door. I opened it to find a familiar face, Detective Alex Monroe, my old friend from college. Ethan, he said, pulling me into a brief hug. I came as soon as I could. You sounded rough on the phone last night. I ushered him in, making introductions. Alex, this is Laura. She works with Jessica. Laura, this is Detective Alex Monroe, an old friend. Alex's eyes narrowed as he looked at Laura. Can she be trusted? I nodded. She's been more honest than anyone else in this mess. Alex sat down, his expression serious. All right, Ethan, tell me everything. For the next hour, I laid it all out: the party, the betrayal, everything Laura had told me about the affair. Alex listened intently, occasionally jotting notes in a small notebook. When I finished, he leaned back. That's one hell of a situation, buddy. What do you want to do about it? I met his gaze, my resolve hardening. I want to destroy them, Alex. Both of them. They humiliated me, made a fool of me. I want them to lose everything. Laura gasped softly, but Alex just nodded. I figured as much. But we need to be smart about this. If we're going to take them down, we need concrete evidence. Stuff that'll hold up in court if it comes to that. What kind of evidence? I asked. Financial records, emails, text messages. Anything that proves Mark's been abusing his position or embezzling funds. And we need proof of Jessica's involvement. I turned to Laura. Do you think you could help us with that? She hesitated for a moment, then nodded firmly. Yes. I have access to a lot of files as Mark's intern, and I know where he keeps the sensitive stuff. It's risky, Alex warned. If you get caught. I don't care, Laura said, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. What they did to Ethan was wrong, and I'm tired of being afraid of Mark. I felt a surge of gratitude towards her. Thank you, Laura. We'll be careful, I promise. Alex stood up, pacing the room. Okay, here's what we do. Laura, you gather what you can from the office. Be discreet, don't take any unnecessary risks. Ethan, you focus on Jessica. Check your joint accounts, credit card statements, anything that might show unusual activity. What about you? I asked. He grinned, a predatory glint in his eye. I'll do some digging on Mark. Something tells me a guy like that has skeletons in his closet. We just need to find them. As they prepared to leave, I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time since the party. Thank you both. I don't know what I'd do without you. Laura squeezed my arm gently. We've got your back, Ethan. Alex nodded, his face serious. We'll make them pay, buddy. Just remember, This isn't going to be quick or easy. I met his gaze, my resolve unwavering. Let's take them down. As they left, I turned back to the empty house. It no longer felt lonely. Instead, it felt like the calm before a storm. And I was ready to unleash that storm on Jessica and Mark with everything I had. Over the next few weeks, our plan unfolded with meticulous precision. Laura proved to be an invaluable asset, her position as Mark's intern providing us with a goldmine of information. "Ethan, you won't believe what I found," Laura said one evening. Her voice hushed even though we were alone in my living room. I leaned forward, eager. "What is it?" She pulled out a USB drive, her hands shaking slightly. "Financial records. Mark's been cooking the books for years. Embezzlement, fraud, you name it." I took the drive, feeling its weight in my hand. "This is huge, Laura. How did you get it?" "I volunteered to stay late, said I wanted to organize some files. Mark trusts me because he thinks I'm too scared to cross him." A small, satisfied smile played on her lips. "He has no idea." Just then, Alex burst through the door, his face flushed with excitement. "You two aren't going to believe this." He spread out a series of photographs on the coffee table. They showed Mark in various compromising positions with several women, none of them Jessica. "Looks like your wife isn't the only one he's been screwing," Alex said. I felt a mixture of disgust and vindication. "Does Jessica know?" Alex shook his head. "I don't think so. But that's not even the best part." He pointed to one particular photo. "See this woman? That's the wife of Mark's biggest client. If this gets out, he'll lose the account and probably half the company's business." I sat back, my mind racing. This is perfect. We can use this to pressure Mark. Laura looked uncertain. "But what about Jessica? Don't we have anything on her?" I pulled out my laptop, opening a series of documents. "Oh, we do. I've been going through our finances. Turns out, Jessica's been siphoning money from our joint accounts for months. Expensive gifts, hotel rooms, all paid for with our money." "Jesus," Alex muttered. "She really did a number on you, didn't she?" I nodded. My jaw clenched. "She did. But now it's our turn." Over the next few days, we pieced together the full extent of Mark and Jessica's deception. The picture it painted was ugly. Years of fraud, infidelity, and manipulation. "We need to confront them," I said finally, after we'd gone over the evidence for what felt like the 100th time. Alex raised an eyebrow. "We could just turn this over to the authorities." I shook my head. "No. I want to see their faces when they realize it's all crumbling down. I want them to know it was me." Laura touched my arm gently. "Ethan, I understand you're angry, but this isn't about anger." I cut her off, my voice steady. "They thought they could play with people's lives, use them like pawns. It's time they learned there are consequences." Alex and Laura exchanged a look, then nodded. "All right," Alex said. "How do you want to do this?" I laid out my plan, watching their expressions shift from concern to understanding, and finally, to determination. "It's risky," Alex warned. "If this goes wrong—" "It won't," I assured him. "They're arrogant. They think they've won. That'll be their downfall." As we finalized the details, I felt a surge of anticipation. Soon, very soon, Jessica and Mark would learn the true meaning of betrayal. The stage was set. My house, once a symbol of the life Jessica and I had built together, was now the backdrop for their downfall. Hidden cameras were strategically placed, ready to capture every moment of their humiliation. I paced the living room, my heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and righteous anger. The doorbell rang, right on time. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. Jessica stood there, looking as beautiful as ever in a sleek black dress. Behind her, Mark loomed, his usual smug expression in place. "Ethan," Jessica said, her voice soft, "thank you for inviting us. I know this can't be easy." I forced a smile, stepping aside to let them in. "Come in. We have a lot to talk about." They entered, their eyes darting around the room. I could see the calculation in their gazes, probably trying to figure out what angle I was playing. "Can I get you anything to drink?" I asked, playing the perfect host. Mark cleared his throat. "Scotch, if you have it." "Just water for me," Jessica added. I nodded, moving to the bar cart. As I poured their drinks, I caught Mark's reflection in the mirror. He was smirking, probably thinking he had the upper hand. If only he knew. We settled into the living room, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us. Finally, Jessica spoke. Ethan, I know you must have a lot of questions. I want you to know that what happened, it wasn't planned. It just... Save it. I cut her off, my voice cold. I didn't invite you here for explanations or apologies. Mark leaned forward, his brow furrowed. Then why did you invite us, Ethan? Surely not for a friendly chat. I smiled, and I saw them both flinch at the edge in it. No, not for a chat. I invited you here to give you a choice. A choice. Jessica echoed, confusion evident in her voice. I nodded, reaching for a folder on the coffee table. Yes, a choice. You see, I've been doing some digging since that night at the party, and what I found was illuminating. I spread out the contents of the folder, financial records, emails, photos. Mark's face paled as he recognized some of the documents. Where did you get those? He demanded, his composure cracking. That's not important, I replied calmly. What's important is what they show. Embezzlement, fraud, infidelity. You've been busy, Mark. Jessica's eyes widened as she looked at the photos of Mark with other women. What is this? This, my dear, is the truth, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. The truth about the man you threw away our marriage for. Mark stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. You can't prove any of this. I raised an eyebrow. Can't I? I think the IRS and the SEC would be very interested in these financial records. And I'm sure your biggest client would love to see these photos of you with his wife. The color drained from Mark's face. Jessica looked between us, her expression a mixture of shock and dawning horror. What do you want? Mark asked, his voice hoarse. I leaned back, savoring the moment. Like I said, I'm giving you a choice. Option 1. You both resign from your positions, effective immediately. You leave town and never come back. You never contact me or anyone associated with me again. And option 2? Jessica whispered. Option 2 is I release everything. To the authorities, to the media, to everyone. Your careers will be over. Your reputations, destroyed. You'll probably both end up in prison. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Jessica broke. This is your fault, she screamed at Mark, tears streaming down her face. You told me no one would find out. You promised me everything would be okay. Mark rounded on her. My fault? You were the one who came on to me. You were the one who said your husband was too boring, too simple for you. I sat back, watching them tear into each other. It was everything I had hoped for and more. Finally, when their screaming match died down, I spoke again. So, what's it going to be? Resignation and exile, or total destruction? Mark slumped back into his seat, defeated. We'll resign. We'll leave. Jessica nodded, not meeting my eyes. I'm so sorry, Ethan. I never meant for it to go this far. I stood up, my face impassive. Your apologies mean nothing to me, Jessica. I want you both out of my house and out of my life. You have 48 hours to resign and leave town. If you're still here after that, I start making phone calls. They nodded, shuffling towards the door. As Jessica passed me, she paused. I did love you, you know. Once. I looked at her, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. No, Jessica. You loved what I represented. Stability, kindness, loyalty. But you never loved me. If you had, we wouldn't be here now. As the door closed behind them, I let out a long breath. It was over. I had one. Alex and Laura emerged from the back room where they had been monitoring the hidden cameras. That was intense, Laura said, her eyes wide. Alex clapped me on the shoulder. You did good, buddy. How do you feel? I thought about it for a moment. Relieved. Satisfied. Ready to move on. As we began to clean up the evidence of our sting operation, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Jessica and Mark were out of my life, and I had my integrity intact. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. Whatever came next, I knew I could handle it. After all, I had survived betrayal and come out stronger. Anything else life threw at me would be a cakewalk in comparison. The morning sun streamed through the windows as I sipped my coffee, savoring the quiet of my home. It had been a week since Jessica and Mark's hasty departure, and the dust was finally beginning to settle. I scrolled through my phone, checking the news for any mentions of their resignations. So far, nothing but vague statements about pursuing other opportunities. Good. They were sticking to the plan. A sharp knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. I opened it to find Mark standing there, his usual polished appearance replaced by disheveled clothes and wild eyes. "We need to talk," he growled, pushing past me into the house. I closed the door, keeping my voice calm. "I thought I made myself clear, Mark. You're supposed to be gone." He whirled on me, jabbing a finger in my chest. "You think you can just ruin my life and get away with it? I built that company from the ground up." I stood my ground, meeting his gaze. "You ruined your own life when you decided to screw my wife and embezzle from your company." I just exposed the truth. Mark's face contorted with rage. "The truth? You want the truth? Here's the truth for you." He pulled out a manila envelope from his jacket. "I've got dirt on you too, Ethan. That animal shelter you love so much? I've got proof you've been skimming donations." I felt a chill run down my spine but kept my face neutral. "That's a lie and you know it." He smirked, waving the envelope. "Does it matter? Once I release this to the press, your reputation will be in tatters. How does it feel to be on the other side, huh?" I stepped closer, my voice low and dangerous. "Is that really the game you want to play, Mark? Because I can assure you, I have a lot more ammunition than you do." "You're bluffing," he spat. I pulled out my phone, dialing a number. "Am I? Let's find out. Hello, is this the SEC? I have some information about Mark Thompson, former CEO of..." Mark's eyes widened in panic. He lunged for the phone, but I easily sidestepped him. Okay, I'll back off. Just don't make that call." I ended the call, fixing Mark with a cold stare. "This is your last warning. Leave town, leave me alone, or I start making real calls. Understood?" He nodded, defeated. As he slunk towards the door, he paused. "She never loved you, you know, Jessica. She was always too good for you." I laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet room. "And yet, here you both are, running away with your tails between your legs. Goodbye, Mark. I better not see you again." As the door closed behind him, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I picked up my phone again, this time calling Alex. "Hey, it's me. We might have a problem. Mark just tried to blackmail me." "No, I handled it, but we need to be prepared. He might try something desperate." After hanging up, I sat heavily on the couch. The victory I'd felt a week ago was tainted now. Mark's words echoed in my head. "She never loved you." I pushed the thought aside. It didn't matter now. What mattered was staying one step ahead of whatever Mark might try next. Weeks passed, and true to their word, Jessica and Mark vanished from town. The scandal of their sudden departures had died down, replaced by new gossip and corporate intrigues. I found myself settling into a new routine, one that didn't revolve around my failed marriage or thoughts of revenge. I threw myself into my work at the animal shelter, finding solace in the simple gratitude of the animals we cared for. It was during one of these long days that I had an epiphany. "Laura," I called out to my newfound friend and ally, who had taken to volunteering at the shelter in her free time. "What do you think about turning this place into something bigger?" She looked up from the kitten she was feeding, curiosity in her eyes. "What do you mean, Ethan?" I gestured around the cramped space. "This shelter, it's doing good work, but we're always struggling for funds, for space. What if we could change that? Create a real animal welfare center, with education programs, a vet clinic, the works?" Laura's eyes lit up. "That sounds amazing. But how would we fund something like that?" I grinned, feeling more energized than I had in months. "I've got some savings, and I think with the right pitch, we could get some serious donors on board. What do you say? Want to help me build something worthwhile?" She nodded enthusiastically. "Count me in." Over the next few months, we poured ourselves into the project. I leveraged my business contacts, while Laura's organizational skills proved invaluable in putting together our proposal. We worked long hours, often ending up at my place, surrounded by papers and takeout containers, brainstorming ideas. One such night, as we were going over potential locations for the new center, Laura looked up at me, her expression serious. "Ethan, can I ask you something personal?" I nodded, putting down the map I'd been studying. "Of course." She hesitated, then plunged ahead. "Are you okay? With everything that happened with Jessica and Mark, I mean, you never really talk about it." I leaned back, considering her question. "Honestly, I'm better than okay. What they did, it hurt. A lot. But it also opened my eyes. I was living a life that wasn't truly mine, trying to make someone else happy at the expense of my own happiness." Laura nodded, encouraging me to continue. "This project, what we're doing here, this is what I've always wanted to do. Make a real difference, build something meaningful." Jessica never understood that. She was always chasing the next promotion, the bigger house, the fancier car. I thought that's what I wanted too, but now I see it was all empty. Laura reached out, squeezing my hand. "I'm glad you found your purpose, Ethan. And for what it's worth, I think you're amazing. Jessica was a fool to let you go." Our eyes met, and for a moment, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in a long time. But before I could examine it further, my phone buzzed with a new email alert. "Oh my God," I breathed, scanning the message. "Laura, we got it. The Harrison Foundation wants to be our primary donor. They're offering us full funding for the first year." Laura squealed with delight, throwing her arms around me in a spontaneous hug. As we celebrated our victory, I felt a warmth spreading through my chest. This, right here, was what happiness felt like. And I'd found it not in the trappings of wealth or status, but in pursuing a dream and surrounding myself with people who truly cared. The road ahead would be challenging, I knew. Building our new animal welfare center from the ground up would take all our energy and resources. But for the first time in a long time, I was excited about the future. Whatever came next, I was ready to face it head on. Months flew by as Laura and I threw ourselves into bringing our animal welfare center to life. The Harrison Foundation's funding had opened doors we never thought possible, and our dream was rapidly becoming a reality. We were in the final stages of construction when the call came that would throw everything into chaos once again. "Ethan Caldwell?" a stern voice asked when I answered my phone. "Yes, that's me. Who's this?" "This is Detective Johnson from the Fraud Division. We need you to come down to the station for questioning regarding some financial irregularities at your animal welfare center." My blood ran cold. There must be some mistake. Our books are completely in order. "That's not for you to decide, Mr. Caldwell. Be at the station in an hour, or we'll come to you." The line went dead, leaving me in stunned silence. I immediately called Alex. "Alex, I need your help. The police want to question me about fraud at the center. This has to be Mark's doing." Alex's voice was stern. "I was afraid he might try something like this. Don't worry. I'll meet you at the station. Don't say anything without me there." An hour later, I sat in a cold interrogation room, Alex by my side, facing Detective Johnson and his partner. "Mr. Caldwell," Johnson began, "we have evidence that suggests you've been embezzling funds from your animal welfare center. Care to explain?" I leaned forward, my voice steady. "Detective, I can assure you that every penny donated to our center has been accounted for and used appropriately. I'd be happy to provide you with our financial records." Johnson slid a folder across the table. "We already have your records, Mr. Caldwell, and they show some very interesting transfers to offshore accounts." I opened the folder, my heart sinking as I saw the fabricated documents. They looked convincing, even to my eyes. "These are forgeries. I've never seen these transfers before in my life." "That's what they all say," Johnson's partner chimed in. "Face it, Caldwell. We've got you dead to rights." Alex intervened. "My client has no further comment at this time. We'll be providing evidence to refute these false allegations." As we left the station, my mind was reeling. "Alex, what are we going to do? If this gets out, it'll destroy everything we've built." Alex's face was set in determination. "We fight back. I've got some contacts in the cybercrimes unit. We'll trace these forgeries back to their source. And when we do, Mark Thompson is going to wish he'd never heard your name." The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, forensic accountants, and sleepless nights. Laura stood by me through it all, her unwavering support a beacon in the storm. "I know you're innocent, Ethan," she said one night as we pored over financial documents. "We'll prove it, no matter what it takes." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we got the break we needed. Alex burst into my office, triumph written all over his face. "We got him, Ethan." My contact traced the forgeries back to an IP address registered to Mark Thompson. He was sloppy, didn't cover his tracks well enough. Relief washed over me, quickly replaced by a cold determination. "What's our next move?" Alex grinned. "We take this to the DA. With this evidence, we can not only clear your name but put Mark away for a long time." The trial that followed was a media sensation. Mark, looking haggard and desperate, pleaded not guilty, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. I took the stand, my voice steady as I recounted his attempts at blackmail and revenge. "Mr. Caldwell," the prosecutor asked, "why do you think Mr. Thompson went to such lengths to discredit you?" I met Mark's eyes across the courtroom. Because he couldn't stand the fact that I had moved on, that I had found success and happiness after what he and my ex-wife did. He thought he could break me, but he only made me stronger. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning a guilty verdict. As Mark was led away in handcuffs, I felt no joy, only a sense of closure. Outside the courthouse, surrounded by reporters, I made a brief statement. "Justice has been served today, not just for me, but for everyone who's ever been a victim of fraud and manipulation. I'm grateful to put this behind me and focus on what really matters, making a difference in the lives of animals who need our help." As the crowd dispersed, I found Laura waiting for me. Without a word, she pulled me into a tight hug. "It's over," she whispered. "You did it, Ethan." I pulled back, looking into her eyes. "No, we did it. I couldn't have gotten through this without you, Laura." In that moment, with the weight of the trial finally lifted, I saw our future stretching out before us. A future filled with purpose, with the joy of making a difference, and just maybe, with love. As we walked away from the courthouse, hand in hand, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them. I had lost a wife, but I had gained so much more. True friends, a meaningful purpose, and the strength to stand tall in the face of adversity. The road hadn't been easy, but standing here now, I wouldn't have changed a thing. This was my story, my triumph, and I had written it on my own terms. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.